Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from? Let's see which city shows up the most. And I request you to subscribe first. We moved into that neighborhood thinking we had finally found peace. It was the kind of place where every lawn looked manicured, every mailbox matched the next, and every neighbor gave you a polite smile but not much more. You know the type. Quiet. Clean. Almost too perfect. But after years of chaos in the military, I thought that's exactly what we needed. A slow, uneventful life. A reset. My wife, Emma, loved it instantly. She'd always wanted a garden. Not a huge one, just a small row of flowers under the kitchen window. She would wake up early, hum a little tune while watering the soil, and talk to the plants like they were her old friends. I used to laugh quietly watching her from the porch. After everything we'd been through together, deployments, relocations, missed holidays, it felt good to see her at peace. We'd been living there for about 8 months. Long enough to know most of the neighborhood faces, even if we didn't know their names. Most people kept to themselves. A wave here, a short hello there. There was a homeowners association, of course. HOA. Rules about paint colors, fence height, and even which trash bins to use. A bit strict but manageable. We were rule followers by nature. After years in the military, I knew how to respect boundaries. Still, every now and then we'd get one of those little notes on our door. Reminder, flower boxes should not extend beyond the windowsill. Or, please keep garden decor to a minimum. Polite, printed in neat font, signed by the HOA compliance team. Emma took them seriously even if she rolled her eyes a little. She didn't want any trouble. Neither did I. But one thing about Emma, she's got a quiet strength. She might be soft-spoken, but she doesn't back down when she knows she's done nothing wrong. It's one of the things I love about her. Then came that morning. It was a Friday. I remember because I had plans to meet an old friend for coffee, someone I served with years ago. We only caught up a few times a year, so I was looking forward to it. I left the house around 9:30 a.m., kissed Emma goodbye, and told her I'd be back before lunch. She was in the garden, wearing that old sun hat she refuses to throw away. There was dirt on her gloves and a smile on her face. I didn't know it then, but it would be the last peaceful moment she'd have that day. While I was sitting across from my friend at a cafe downtown, laughing over old stories, something entirely different was happening back home. It started with a knock. 3 people from the HOA compliance team showed up at our door. Not the usual woman who leaves notes. These were new faces. Strangers. One of them was holding a clipboard, another had a measuring tape, and the third, well, he looked more like private security than a neighborhood volunteer. Emma answered the door with the same politeness she gives everyone. She's always respectful. But they didn't come with respect. The clipboard guy started talking fast. Something about a violation. Something about the height of the flower bed, or the type of mulch she used. It didn't make sense. The rules they were quoting weren't even part of the standard HOA agreement. Emma asked if they could show her in writing, and that's when things shifted. Their tone changed. From civil to aggressive. One of them stepped closer. Too close. He raised his voice. Told her she was being difficult. Told her the rules were clear. Emma, confused and nervous, asked him to step back. She said she'd be happy to fix whatever was needed, but not like this. Not with 3 people standing on her porch shouting orders. She tried to shut the door. That's when it happened. The one who looked like security put his foot in the door. Stopped it from closing. And before she could react, he shoved it open. She stumbled back. Fell onto the porch floor. Her gardening gloves scratched across the wood. She was in shock. Not crying. Just frozen. They stepped inside. Yes, inside our home. Only a few feet. But enough to make it clear this wasn't about a flower bed anymore. This was about power. Control. Intimidation. Emma, still on the ground, told them to leave. Said she was calling the police. That's when a neighbor across the street saw what was happening and rushed over. Thank God for her. She shouted. Asked what the hell was going on. Took out her phone and started recording. That seemed to spook them. They backed off just a little. Enough for Emma to get up and get inside. She locked the door and called me immediately. I didn't pick up. I didn't even see the missed call. But a minute later, another neighbor called. A guy I barely knew. Said, "Hey man, something's going on at your house. Your wife's okay, but it got real bad. You need to come home. Now." I didn't ask questions. I just stood up, told my friend I had to go, and ran out of the cafe like the building was on fire. The 20-minute drive felt like hours. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight they were going numb. My chest was tight. My mind was racing. Was she hurt? What had they done? What? And more importantly, who gave them the right? When I finally turned onto our street, I saw the small crowd. A few neighbors standing near our front yard, phones in hand, talking quietly. The HOA group was still there, off to the side, looking nervous now. The police had just arrived, 2 patrol cars pulling up behind me. I pulled into the driveway, got out, and the first thing I saw was Emma standing by the door. Her eyes met mine. She wasn't crying, but she looked different, like something inside her had been shaken. Not broken, just rattled in a way I'd never seen before. I walked straight to her, put my arms around her. She didn't say a word for a long time. She just held on. Behind me I could hear voices. The HOA people trying to explain themselves. Something about enforcing compliance and escalating behavior and protecting community standards. I heard one of them say Emma had been non-cooperative. Another claimed she had been verbally abusive. I knew that was a lie. I've known Emma for over 2 decades. She doesn't even raise her voice when she's angry. She just stares at you until you run out of excuses. A police officer approached me, asked if I was the homeowner. I nodded. Then he asked if I wanted to file a report. I turned to the group from the HOA, standing there like they were the victims in all of this, and I took a step forward. But I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there and looked each of them in the eye. They didn't know me. They didn't know my past. They didn't know what I'd seen, what I'd survived, or what kind of man I used to be before peace and flowers and coffee shops became my daily life. But they were about to find out. And for the first time since the incident began, it was them who looked afraid. Not my wife. Not me. The officer stood there, pen in hand, notebook ready. But I didn't answer him right away. I was still looking at the 3 HOA enforcers, watching how they shifted on their feet, how their confidence was fading with each second that passed. The one who shoved the door open, tall, heavy build with a security-style haircut, couldn't meet my eyes. The clipboard guy tried to look unfazed, but his hands were fidgeting. And the third one, the one who had yelled at Emma, kept glancing toward his car like he wished he could disappear. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I just said one sentence. You stepped into my home. That's all. No threats. No drama. Just the truth. The officer looked up from his notepad. Sir, did they force entry? Emma nodded quietly behind me. Another neighbor stepped forward and confirmed it. Then a third voice came, shaky but clear. The woman who had filmed everything. I have it all on video, she said. They pushed her. She told them to leave. They refused. The energy shifted. Again. Now the HOA team looked panicked. The one with the clipboard stammered something about a misunderstanding. He claimed they were only trying to communicate and that Emma overreacted. That they had a right to enforce the community guidelines. But no one was buying it anymore. The police took their statements separately. I didn't bother listening. I was focused on Emma. Her hands were still shaking slightly. She was trying to stay composed, but I could tell it had hit her harder than she wanted to admit. She's strong, always has been, but she had never experienced anything like this. Not in her own home. Not on a quiet Friday morning when all she wanted was to trim the lavender bush and finish planting daisies. I kept my arm around her while the officers gathered what they needed. Eventually, one of them came back and told us charges could be filed: trespassing, harassment, maybe even assault. He said the video was very clear. The HOA representatives had no legal authority to enter the property, let alone push someone or cross the threshold without permission. I nodded, said we'd think about it. But inside, something had already shifted. I had spent most of my life controlling my emotions. That's what they drill into you in the Navy. Stay calm. Stay alert. Don't act on anger. Don't let pride lead. But that day, standing there with my wife still trembling beside me, I felt something deeper than anger. It was personal. This wasn't war. This wasn't a mission. This was my home. My wife. And these people had crossed a line. Later that day, after the police left, we sat on the couch in silence for a long time. Emma held a cup of tea, but she wasn't drinking it. I could see her replaying everything in her head. The knock. The yelling. The shove. The fall. She finally looked at me and said, I wasn't scared, not really. But I felt so powerless. That word stuck with me. Powerless. No one should feel that way in their own home. Not ever. And certainly not because of a group of self-appointed neighborhood tyrants. I told her the truth. She had handled it with more courage than most people ever could. But I also told her something else, something I hadn't said in a long time. I didn't retire because I was done protecting people, I said. I just thought I didn't have to anymore. She didn't say anything. She just reached for my hand. The next morning I started making calls. Not to lawyers. Not yet. I called a few friends. People I hadn't spoken to in a while. Some were in private security now. Others worked in conflict resolution, legal compliance, neighborhood consulting. And a few were still in the service, though stationed elsewhere. I asked questions. A lot of them. How far can an HOA legally go? What are the limits of enforcement? What rights do homeowners really have? And the more I learned, the angrier I got. These people, this group of rule pushers with name tags and clipboards, had no authority to do what they did. None. They weren't trained. They weren't elected officials. They were volunteers, most of them without any legal knowledge or background. Just neighbors with a little bit of power, and no idea how to use it. What they did to Emma wasn't just wrong. It was unlawful. Over the next few days, more neighbors came by. Quietly, carefully, like they were afraid to be seen. But they had stories. Some had been harassed over mailbox colors. Others had gotten warnings for harmless decorations. One man told me his wife had been reported for hanging a wind chime that made too much noise. A few even said they'd filed complaints, but nothing ever came of it. The HOA board dismissed them. Always protected their own. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. And now, finally, someone had caught it on camera. Emma didn't want revenge. That's not who she is. But she wanted justice. So did I. Not just for her, but for everyone else who had stayed silent. I filed a formal complaint with the state's housing board. Submitted the video, the statements, everything. I also contacted a civil rights attorney who specialized in HOA abuse. He reviewed the footage and said something that stuck with me. They messed with the wrong family. He wasn't wrong. Word got around the neighborhood faster than I expected. Some supported us openly. Others kept their distance, too afraid to be caught in the middle. The HOA tried to save face. Sent out a community email calling it a misunderstanding and promising a review of procedures. They didn't name us, but everyone knew. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Hand-delivered. It was from the HOA president. A formal apology. It was neatly written. Full of polite language. Said the actions of the compliance team did not reflect the values of the association. Said they would review protocol and retrain staff. But not once did it say what really mattered. They never said what they did was wrong. They just said it was unfortunate. Emma read it and placed it gently in the trash. We didn't respond. Instead, we kept gathering stories, gathering support, planning the next step. And slowly, the fear that had once silenced the community began to fade. People started talking, started asking questions, started pushing back. And the HOA? Well, they started sweating. It wasn't about revenge. It was about drawing a line. A line they should have never crossed. Because they didn't just shove a door open that day. They woke someone who had spent a lifetime learning how to handle bullies, threats, and chaos. And this time, I wasn't protecting a nation or a mission. I was protecting my wife. And that made all the difference. It was a week later when they tried to visit again. Different faces this time. The original 3 were nowhere in sight. Instead, 2 board members, middle-aged, dressed a little too neatly, stood at our doorstep with a printed letter and forced smiles. They said they wanted to clear the air. Said they deeply regretted what happened and hoped we could move forward peacefully. I let them speak. I didn't interrupt. Emma stood beside me, arms folded, her expression calm but unreadable. They handed me the letter. It was another apology, more carefully worded than the last. But what caught my eye was the part where they asked us to consider not pressing charges, for the good of the neighborhood. That was their real reason for coming. Not to make things right. To protect themselves. I looked at them both and asked, "Do you even know what you're apologizing for?" One of them blinked. The other looked at the ground. I waited. They said nothing. That's when I told them who I was. That I was a retired Navy SEAL. That I'd spent years defending this country, protecting people I didn't even know, just because it was the right thing to do. I told them that Emma had stood by me through all of it. Every deployment, every long-distance call, every moment of uncertainty. And now, when she was finally building a peaceful life, they had tried to take that from her with intimidation and force. They didn't speak again. Didn't ask questions. Just nodded slowly and walked away. That was the last time anyone from the HOA came to our door. But we weren't done. With the help of the attorney, we attended a town hearing. Presented our case formally. Shared the footage, the witness statements, the years of complaints from neighbors who'd been ignored. What happened next wasn't dramatic. No big courtroom scene. No shouting. Just slow, steady justice. 3 members of the HOA compliance team were removed. New protocols were put in place. Mandatory training was introduced, real training with legal experts and conflict resolution professionals. And Emma? She didn't just go back to gardening. She joined the new board. Not out of anger. Not for control. But to make sure no one else was ever treated the way she was. I still sit on the porch sometimes, coffee in hand, watching her wave at neighbors passing by. They stop more often now. They smile wider. The silence is gone. And every now and then someone comes up and says, "Thank you." But I know who really deserves it. The woman who stood her ground even when she was pushed, and reminded this neighborhood what strength really looks like.